I predict a Duke's victory.
Boom! Welcome to another episode of the Crush Fantasy Football Podcast with your host, as always, James and Mr. Michael Dolan. How are you doing today?
Doing well. I'm doing well. I got some soreness in my teeth. I accidentally left a whitening strip on for a little too long last night. It was probably on there for like a good hour, maybe a little more, and so I got some real sensitive lower teeth today. But other than that, I'm doing all right.
Do you have a list?
No, I don't think
Is
so.
this going to impact your podcast performance? I don't understand. How do you leave that on? Don't those things always just like kind of crumble up and not work anyway?
I don't think so. I mean, mine stood on pretty well. Like I forgot to set a timer, and so I just like looked up and was like, "Oh crap, this thing's been on for a while." Like forgot I was wearing it. They're not like super
Oh,
uncomfortable or
wow.
anything.
So they're not like ski boots
No,
where you don't forget that you're wearing them.
nothing like ski boots.
Wait, do you have like reusable ones or like the disposable?
No, they're disposable.
I've never known those to work well.
They get the job done.
Well, your teeth look fantastic.
Thank you.
today.
That's what I was going for.
Aren't you gonna ask me how my day was?
No,
Just-
I'm in
I was
pain.
just-
You're supposed to console me.
I was ready for you to be like, "Oh, how are you doing today, James? What's new with you?" What? All right. Well, I hope you can power through this episode. We don't even need to get to me. We'll start off as usual. Take Montezuma, sponsored by Soiree Season. If you're looking for something different and you're in the wedding registry game, check out Soiree Season, promo code CrushFF for 35% off. Dolan, hit us with your Montezuma.
Yeah, and so we're actually splitting Take Montezuma up this week. This episode is going to be recorded in two parts, so I'll do mine now, and James will save his for part 2 of the episode. But I'm going to do my football hot take for this one, and this is not really a hot take as much as it is just something that like I want to see and I'm excited about. And regarding football is once Derrick Henry retires, I don't think we have another just monster behemoth of a human running back available. And we've always had one of those, and we just need one of those heir apparents. Like we had, Brandon Jacobs was, I would say, the big one the generation before him. Before that, it was Jerome Bettis. And we just need another one of these just hulking humans carrying the football, because it always makes the game so much more fun to see those kind of guys on the field. And unless I'm missing someone, I don't think there's anybody in the college ranks coming out soon who fits that mold. I don't think there are any up-and-comers currently in the NFL. And so someone's got to step up and fill that void somehow. And I hope, for the sake of entertainment and watching the game, we get one of those guys soon.
The one that popped into my mind, I don't know if it fits this category, is Ollie Gordon's huge, right?
He's the one that I thought about. He's not quite Derrick Henry big, but I think he's like 225, 230, whereas Henry's like 250, 260 or whatever.
Oh, so he's
I'm
way
talking
smaller.
like the 250 plus pounders.
So like an AJ Dillon.
Yeah, but like good.
But good, yeah. A big guy. I like it. I don't have any questions. Rebuttal. I get it. It's more fun, especially Henry. Henry's so fast, and he doesn't look like he's like a bear. Where it's like he doesn't look like he's that fast, but then when you're like, oh my god, the amount of ground he covers at that size is true. Yeah,
he's not like shifty. He doesn't like move around super well. But once you get him in a straight line, it's like he's as fast as anybody. It seems
like. No, what about twitchy? He's not twitchy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe Ollie Gordon gets like a couple Krispy Kremes and a couple milkshakes, and that's our next guy.
That could be it. Who knows?
All right. As always, take Montezuma, Soiree. See, that wasn't a hot take. Everybody likes big guy.
I know. I gave the caveat. It wasn't my best one, but I needed to get it out there for the people. I know people feel the same as me. So start the drum beat.
Okay, what we're going to do today, Dolan, kind of similar to the other shows that we did with our top running backs, top wide receivers for the 2025 fantasy season. So we're going to do quarterbacks 6 through 10, and then there'll be a second episode where we go through quarterbacks 1 through 5. All right, you start with your 10th, and then if my 10th is different, then I'll go to my 10th and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But
Perfect.
if you want to kick us off, go ahead.
So my number 10 is one of my previous hot takes, actually, is Jared Goff. I think it's pretty simple. Goff is not going to give you anything as far as a running quarterback goes. And then it starts to shift to, okay, who's the best offense? Who's just going to be able to put up the most points? And to me, that is pretty clearly Jared Goff is one of the elite quarterbacks when it comes to touchdown potential, yardage potential, and a lot of that is due to his supporting cast. We all know Amon-Ra St. Brown is awesome. Jameson Williams is a big play waiting to happen. I think he's in for a monster season. Sam Laporta is being drafted as a top 5 tight end. Jahmyr Gibbs is a great threat out the backfield. I think because their O-line took a slight step back this season, that means they're probably not going to be able to run as much, and so therefore they're going to have to throw more. So I think even if the offense as a whole takes a pretty decent step back from the 30-plus points per game they were averaging last year, I think they're still going to be one of the best in the league. I think Goff's going to have a ton of touchdown potential, and even if he's not the most exciting pick there is, I do still think he's going to put up consistent numbers week in and week out, and he will have those couple spike games where he just throws for 4 or 5 touchdowns and wins his week for you single-handedly. So this is just as much a bet on the Lions offense as it is Jared Goff himself, but at the price of a QB 10, that's an offense that I'm very happy to bet on.
Yeah, this just feels like an obvious regression candidate to me. I don't have the same faith in the Lions offense as you do, losing Ben Johnson. And we have a 10-year sample size, maybe 8, of Jared Goff not being a top 10 quarterback. And I think he was QB7 in fantasy points per game, with the highest passing touchdown numbers of his career at 37. And so I just think passing numbers year over year aren't sticking. And everything worked out last year. And so I think the offense regresses a little. I think the passing numbers will come down. And I think that's the difference between Goff as like a borderline, like 8, 9, 10 versus QB kind of 12 through 15. And I just think that 12 through 15 feels a little more likely for him.
That's, understandable. And for me personally, honestly, I think anywhere from QB 9 to like 17 are pretty much the same for me. And so when I'm in that range, I'm kind of like, all right, let me just pick the best offenses. And I do still think outside of, one other name we'll get to in a sec, Goff has that feather in his cap more so than most.
All right, then I'll get to my 10th. And I honestly really struggled with this whole exercise, but a guy I kept going back and forth with and just eventually put there was Bo Nix. So he was quarterback 8 in fantasy points per game as a rookie, 6th in total pass attempts, 6th in touchdowns, 12th in yards. And it was really a case of 2 seasons for Bo Nix. He only had 6 games under 15 points last year. 3 of them were in the first 4 weeks, kind of while he was adjusting. So he got the bad out of the way early, and then throughout the rest of the year, he had 6 games over 20 points. He averaged 21.4 points per game the back half of the year, so weeks 8 through 18. And Bo Nix runs the ball. So I think this is a theme that we'll both hit on a lot when talking quarterbacks is you want rushing upside. And Bo Nix ran for essentially 430 yards, 4 touchdowns, almost 4 points per game just from rushing last year. And so I think that's probably the ceiling that he puts together the passing with a solid rushing floor. And I think you can make a good case for a top 10 quarterback. I think the only floor case that I could come up with is the defense is a little better and they might not have to throw as much. And so if they lean on the run because they're not in these shootouts, then you could see Knicks fall out of that top 10 range. But yeah, you didn't have them there. So curious your thoughts on Mr.
Yeah, I actually
our hometown hero.
As much as I like Knicks the talent and for the Broncos, I'm extremely excited. I'm not in on him for fantasy football. There's not really anyone on the Broncos who gets me super excited. I think there's a lot of fine pass catchers for Bo Nix, but no one who I think is going to really help him elevate outside of Sean Payton himself, but that's a different story. And I guess I'm a little less bullish on the rushing for Knicks than you are. Like, I think that 400-ish yard mark is about his ceiling. And he'll get a couple touchdowns, but I don't necessarily think he's a lock to have more touchdowns than, someone like Trevor Lawrence, for example, especially with the addition of RJ Harvey. I think that'll lead to more checkdowns rather than scrambles.
Yep.
But my fears overall, I think, are the same as yours. I do think their defense is going to be really, really strong, and I think they have made a lot of conscious efforts this offseason to upgrade the run game. So I do just think from a pure volume perspective, that's what scares me away from Bo Nix, even if I do like the talent and he does have a smidge more rushing upside than a couple guys that I do have higher on the list.
We like the weapons better than last year, right? I think as a whole, like Evan Ingram, and RJ Harvey.
Like, I think Evan
year.
Ingram's a guy who's going to help them stay on schedule, but you're not going to be getting, all of a sudden Evan Ingram ripped off a 60-yard touchdown. And I think those are the types of plays that really help boost a quarterback because, if it is 5 yards to Evan Ingram here, 6 yards to Evan Ingram there, 12 yards to Cortland Sutton, like those are long drives. And I think they have a good offense for sustaining ball control, but not so much for just putting up points in a hurry.
Yeah, that's why I almost kept them off. You're exactly right.
So is it back to me for number 9?
Back to you. Hit it.
All right. The top of this tier that I have of, the pocket passers who I'd be comfortable with as a QB, but not necessarily guys I'm banking on are truly moving the needle. And this one is Baker Mayfield. And basically everything that I said about Jared Goff applies to Baker Mayfield as well. I think there's a smidge more rushing upside. I do think last year's rushing statistics were a bit of an anomaly for Mayfield, but I think he has a tiny, tiny, tiny bit more upside than Goff does. Not quite as much as Bo Nix, I would say, in fairness, but I do think his weapons are just going to be absolutely stacked. I think Bucky Irvin's a great weapon out of the backfield. We talked about him in the running backs pod. Obviously, Mike Evans is, a lock for 1,000 yards, as he always is. Chris Godwin injury definitely still scares me, but having guys like Ibuka behind him, I guess the Jalen McMillan injury sounds pretty serious, and that one, could scare me away a little bit. But I think even if some of those guys are banged up, they're so deep at receiver, and even Cade Otton has shown he's a capable tight end that I think all signs point to this offense just wanting to absolutely let it rip. And I think Baker's a perfect quarterback for that. So I think he's as good a bet as anybody to just lead the league in passing yards this year. And I think there will be touchdowns that follow that as well. So I'm pretty in on just this Bucs passing attack overall. And that leads to their quarterback being a top 10 guy for me.
This was my hardest guy to omit from the list, to be honest. Baker's not in my top 10 is the same reasons Jared Goff was not in my top 10. He was 4th in fantasy points per game last year. He had an outlier season. So I think he threw 41 touchdowns last year. I think that number is for sure going to come down. I think their percentage of rushing touchdowns to passing touchdowns will favor the run more than it did last year. I also think, to your point, the running numbers were a bit of an outlier. So Baker had his best running season ever, like over 3 points per game just running the ball. And that, if you look at his kind of career arc, it is a major outlier season. I don't think he's ever been over 200 besides last year. So I think the combination of both of those things, a loss of the offensive coordinator, very similar to Jared Goff, I think that there is just some natural regression here. But I do like the weapon, so I agree with you there.
Yeah. And again, I think from Mayfield on, I have a tier from like 9 through 17 that I'm like, I view all these guys pretty interchangeably. So even though I am higher on these guys than a lot ranked behind them, I think just based on where ADP is, I don't envision myself drafting them a ton. If it is something where they fall and I'm like, okay, great, I'm happy to grab my QB 9 or 10, like in the double-digit rounds, I will. But I think Baker in particular, I'm not seeing him fall in any mocks or anything that I'm doing.
Yeah, and I guess we should highlight that. This isn't there's no ADP or cost involved here.
Exactly.
Because Baker, you'll pay a higher price than a lot of other QBs, right, that we're going to go through today. But we're not. We're just saying Baker as where we think he's going to finish, not at cost. Is he the best value?
Yep.
That's interesting. You said 9 through 17. I think it's 6 through 17. Maybe we can talk about it when we get to 6, but I don't know. I thought everybody after those top 5 were. I'm like, hey, you can make a case for anybody. So yeah, let's move on, and then maybe we can get to that when we talk kind of our QB 6s and 7s. For my QB 9, I had Mr. Justin Fields. This is, and I think the fantasy community understands this. This is not I think Justin Fields is a good quarterback. This is how valuable rushing is at the quarterback position argument. So basically Justin Fields in the last 3 years. So in 2022, he was 5th in fantasy points per game. That's the last time he was the starter for the entire season. Over the first 6 weeks of last year, he was 7th in fantasy points per game for the Steelers before Russell Wilson took back over. And even in his down year where he got benched in 2023, he finished as QB9 fantasy points per game for the Bears. So I think it's a pretty safe argument if Justin Fields is going to run the ball like he has in the past, that there's a really, really good chance he'll be a top 10 quarterback. And so, yeah, that's why he's my 9th quarterback.
Yeah, I got nothing to add, so I'll keep this quick and just say I have Fields at 8, so I think we are very much on the same page here. I know I've talked about kind of my stance on Field a couple times in previous episodes, but yeah, I think he's as good a bet as anybody to lead the entire Jets team in rushing this year, and as we know, that translates extremely well to fantasy production, so I'm right there with you.
What kind of passing season does he have to get him from QB9 to QB3, 5, right?
I don't see QB3 in the outcomes. This is very much a floor pick for me. It's like I think the rushing upside is weirdly, we call it rushing upside, but to me it's really rushing floor.
It's a floor. Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I think he's going to average like 200 passing yards a game. Like he's probably going to average the least amount of passing yards out of every starting QB. I just think the rushing is going to be enough. Like you said with Knicks, he averaged like 4 rushing points a game. I think with Fields, it's going to be like 9 or 10. It's going to be absurd. I think he's going to average like 50, 60 rushing yards a game. And he's probably a good bet for, let's call it, half a touchdown a game. So I think I'm just in on what that floor brings. And for the passing, as long as he doesn't get benched, which I think talent-wise is in the cards, but I think ecosystem-wise with what he has with the Jets is not as much. That's all he really needs to do as a passer to return good value as a fantasy quarterback.
Cool. So you had him at 8, right? So you have 2 more left on your list. Do we want to get to my 8 or go to your 7?
Let's save your 8 because I think that one's actually going to be a little spicy.
Cool.
And we'll come back to that
your
one.
7.
And my number 7 is Kyler Murray. I have him and Justin Fields in a tier of their own, and it's just called rushing upside. And with Kyler, I do think the rushing upside is actually more upside. We've seen with Kyler, he's a much more proven passer. He's not someone who's going to be, throwing for 5,000 yards or anything crazy like that. He's actually never hit 4,000 yards once in his career, which is a pretty crazy stat. He's gotten close a couple times, and I could see, this year with a big leap from Marvin Harrison being the year he cracks that, but he's not going to be at like 4,500 yards. He'll probably barely be over 4,000 if he hits it. But he's been pretty adamant this offseason that he does want to run the ball more. And so I'm kind of buying into that. And I think when we saw Pete Kyler from a fantasy perspective a couple years ago, he was running the ball a lot. And that's when you would get those occasional boom weeks where he's just like, oh, wow, Kyler had 28 points this week. The next week he had 33. The downside with him is he's extremely inconsistent. So I think he's really scary because he is that kind of guy who could have you 2 weeks where he wins the league for you, and then the next week he scores 8 points. So that does scare me. You just got to kind of hope that the winning weeks are more valuable than that, and one of those, losing performances doesn't come in the playoffs.
You made the point. 9 games last year under 15 points. Especially if you're in a 1 quarterback league, you can't be giving up 10 points at the quarterback position in 9 weeks. And so I don't know. It's more of a frustration with Kyler because on paper it all makes sense. Like he runs the ball. He's a decently to good passer. He's finished in the top 5 twice before the ACL injury. He's another year after the ACL injury. After last year, there's something about, it might be a vibes thing. That 2024 was so disappointing. I don't know what the scenario would be where I'd take him as my QB1 in a 1 QB.
That's totally fair. And I 100% get the vibes nature. I think you and I just philosophically are pretty different on how much we like volatility versus stability. And I think I do lean more towards, hey, give me the week winning weeks. In expense for some of the stability. Obviously, the guys that give you both are going to be top 5 guys.
Of course.
But I do think I have a bit more tolerance for that is a big part of it. And again, I think I'm more optimistic of what Marv can do for that offense in year 2, as we've talked about a ton here.
All right. You alluded to it. My 8th quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. So I will let you kind of go into the the bull or the ceiling case, but I think we all
You
know
sure? I mean, I
who
can go
and
get Clem. I can get him back down here if you want, and just get
Clem,
him.
Clem didn't make it high enough. He said top five. He didn't say top three. Um, and we know what Mahomes is the good. So I'll try to make the why I don't think much will change and why he's around QB8 for me and not kind of QB5 or six. So I think it's pretty well established now that he hasn't been a top 10 quarterback in fantasy points per game these last two seasons, so 10th, 11th, respectively, which has seemed to coincide with Matt Nagy and the shift to a lower A dot or average depth of target. So they're just not throwing the ball downfield like they used to. He's now 2 straight seasons below 30 touchdowns. And Mahomes is not a runner. He relies on passing yards and passing touchdowns to hit that ceiling like he has in the past. And that hasn't happened the last 2 years. And I'm not sure what's going to change. They were 17th in deep ball attempts last year. I know they're saying they're going to change. They said they were going to change last year. 15th in total air yards last year. They said they're going to change. They haven't changed. And the offensive line wasn't any good last year. So Mahomes, I think, was second in throws under pressure. I know people expect that to get a little better this year. I think that remains to be seen. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, obviously. I think that he will sit right around what happened these past 2 years, and he'll be somewhere in the 7 to 10 range with limited top five upside.
My argument for this one is as simple as I just don't want to be betting against Patrick Mahomes, and I do think the ceiling is still there. Of the Chiefs have just decided we're going to go on a revenge tour. We're pissed off. We're going to get back to the offense that truly made us great.
Yeah.
I think their defense being a lot better than it was during that era is the biggest thing working against them.
Yeah.
But I do think that your point about last year, they said they wanted to chuck the ball down the field more. I do think injuries played a role in that. Because when Rashee Rice went out, they kind of slowly started putting Xavier Worthy in a little bit of that role to kind of have him run a little more of the crossers and the run after catch stuff, which I think they ideally want him in that deep threat field stretching role. I think Hollywood Brown can play that as well. I think this offense is going to be humming, and I do think Mahomes has a shot at cracking, I think Clem said 35 plus touchdowns on his hot take. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets, above 40. And I think, Mahomes has as good a shot at anybody as leading the league in passing touchdowns this year. So I do think the upside's there, even if we haven't seen it in recent years.
Yep, I hope they do it. I'm rooting for it. That offense, what it used to be, was so much more fun than what it's turned into. All right, my next guy, so 7th on my list, is Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy was top 10 in fantasy points per game quietly these last 2 years. So he was 10th last year, 6th the year before, when the team was healthy. So I think that's the bet you're making. I think it's a bet on the Niners are a lot healthier than last year. Last year was the year from hell, and they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. And so Brock Purdy's going to throw, let's call it 30 plus, 35 plus passing touchdowns. He quietly established a little bit of an ability to scramble last year. I don't know if something I'd count on, but would be a nice sprinkle on top of the cupcake if he continues that at all. I also think there's going to be some positive touchdown regression. So he only threw 20 last year, over 30 the year before. And so I think that number is for sure over 30 this year. I think the Niners offense is going to be really good. I just think it's going to be more like 2023 Purdy and not last season.
Yeah, I got Purdy all the way down at QB 15. And again, that means I have him in a ssimilar tier as, Mayfield and Goff and a lot of those guys. So he's actually someone who I do find myself targeting a little bit because his ranking is more in line with my ADP. I don't see the Niners offense as wanting to be particularly pass happy. I think Purdy runs the offense really well, but I do think they still want to be more of a run the ball play action type of team. So I don't love the volume. I think the pass catchers scare me a little bit. I think Kittle's in for a monster season. I really like Ricky Pearsall as a breakout. But if Ayuk doesn't come back, it's like I don't necessarily trust those two. Plus, Juwan Jennings, who I think is another really high floor guy. To give the juice and create the big plays needed to vault Purdy into that, oh, wow, he's, potentially a top 5 guy. I could absolutely see a QB1 season in his range of outcomes. But I think you need to squint and see a lot of things right, which again is how it is for a lot of the guys in his tier.
Hmm.
But I definitely not as high on him as you are this year.
See, the thing where you lose me on the running back thing is if you wanted to run the ball a ton, right, and turn out yards, why didn't they just keep Jordan Mason? And so, unless B Rob's really going to get 12 carries a game, I think they're going to have to rely on Purdy to move the ball a little bit.
Yeah, I don't hate the argument. I'm just not all the way there with you. But I know we got through all
So,
of my five
just me,
already.
right?
So yeah, we
Yeah.
got one more for you.
All right. We've talked about him, I think, probably more than anybody else this offseason, is our love for the Cowboys offense. Dak obviously has precedent being in this realm, so he was fourth fantasy points per game 2 years ago when he played. He was third in fantasy points per game in 2019. So he's lived in this realm. He's had 30 plus passing touchdowns, 4,400 yards in his last three healthy seasons. CD, Pickens, no ability to run the ball, I think is all just going to be the Cowboys and Dak throwing it all over the field. And if we're betting on touchdowns this year, which is what you have to bet on when you're talking pocket passers, I think Dak Prescott has as good of a chance as anybody to lead the league in touchdown passes. And that is why I'm going with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I love the argument. I know that was my hot take a week or two ago now, is that I'm also extremely bullish on Dak, but I think my bullishness is a little more so relative to expectations. He was actually my first guy out. I have him ranked at 11 on my quarterbacks list. I think that if the cards all break right, like I absolutely see the path to a top 5 season for Prescott, and I think at cost, he's someone I'm absolutely targeting a ton this year because he's not priced as a QB6. He's not even priced as a QB11. And so I think he's very attainable in drafts. And I think with the upside he has, because of those weapons around him and because of how poor the run game and potentially the defense are, I think he could be in for just a monster season as a passer.
Yep. Did you find this exercise really difficult, who to put 6, or was it pretty easy for you? I wanted to get Caleb Williams and Drake May in this list somehow. And so I thought it was really, really difficult to pick who's QB6 versus who's QB15.
Not particularly, because I kind of got to a point after Fields where I was like, okay, this is where I'm just starting to essentially rank the pocket passers I like. And for that exercise, I basically just went through, okay, well, which offenses or passing offenses in particular do I like? And so I kind of just at that point in the draft started looking at it that way, because I don't think many of those guys after Fields have like true needle moving rushing upside. Yes, there's a little bit of a sprinkle in there, and I use that as kind of a tiebreaker at times, but not enough to truly influence my ranking. So it kind of got to a point where it's just like, let me just rank the offenses.
I got to Trevor Lawrence. I'm like, yeah, he could be a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think he was the last guy in that tier I had, where it's like, so again, it's like I don't hate the idea of just using the second to last pick in a draft on Trevor Lawrence and being like, I think he's got a shot at being as good as Purdy, as good as Prescott, as good as Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield.
When drafting these guys, where's your line of, oh, I need 2 quarterbacks versus I'm good with just my guy?
I just don't. I consistently draft 1 QB. The only situation where I wouldn't have is another one that we talked about on the previous pod, would have been if Anthony Richardson won the starting job. He is the kind of guy who I would have paired with a more stable passer, because he, unlike Fields, I think, is someone who, if he got the starting job, I could see it getting yanked away from him at any second. So that was the one scenario where I found myself drafting 2 in mock drafts. But if I get any of these guys in that top 17, which I mean, I'm going to, I'm just not going to waste a roster spot on another QB.
I feel less confident in you than I like. At least what I like to do is with one of these kind of not top 5 guys, I like getting 2 for a couple reasons. One, it's hard to predict. Yeah, we'll play matchups, and it's hard to predict who's going to have a good touchdown season, right? And so I like. So say you draft Goff and things don't go well, then it's like, oh, I'm stuck with Goff. At least if you draft Goff and Trevor Lawrence, I think you play matchups and then kind of, go touchdowns. Especially since a lot of these guys, they don't cost that much. Like the Drake Mays, the Caleb Williams, the Trevor Lawrences, you can essentially be had as the second, third, last pick in your draft.
Yeah, and this is also one where knowing your league is important. Sorry, I know we're trying to wrap up here. But it's like if you're in a league where it's like most of your league drafts 2 quarterbacks, then maybe you have to, or maybe your bench is a little deeper. And so you're like, okay, I don't feel like I need to worry as much about the open roster space. So, knowing your league, both from a settings and just your league mates perspective, I think can influence those decisions some as well.
That's actually a really, really good point. All right. Quarterbacks 6 through 10. We should put some sort of wager on this because this one was hard, I think. And we had a lot different. And
so we did. We were very different. This was definitely our most different list yet. But I'm looking forward to keeping the conversation going in part 2.